Hello and welcome back to a critique of Outlast. I'm Mauler and today we'll be carrying on getting stuck into the story. Now, as I was last commenting on things I liked and disliked about the story, let's continue with something that is far more in the middle of the road. Throughout Outlast, you are given objectives. These are to try and guide you in terms of motivation throughout the unraveling story. The first objective is to investigate Mount Massive Asylum, which is fine. As a journalist, we can empathize with following the story no matter how horrifying or life-endangering it is, I guess. Which is why I don't understand these people.
Firstly, who accepts a job to go out into an abandoned asylum in the middle of nowhere by themselves?
Yeah, at night.
Alone, at night, armed with nothing but a camcorder.
You make the terrible decision to attempt to uncover the atrocities yourself.
Outlast opens with someone doing something spectacularly stupid.
Well, it is precisely a good idea because of the danger for other people that you are trying to expose. What exactly do you think makes journalists want to expose shit like this? Do you think the threat of death has always historically put hardcore journalists off the trail of human rights violation stories? Doesn't seem as stupid now, does it? Anyway, once you get into the asylum and understand exactly what has happened, combined with the fact that you have it recorded, your new goal is to escape. How do we do this? Well, we need to open up the security doors, and to do that, we need to get to security, and to do that, we need a key. Good stuff, makes sense to me. Once you commit to completing each of these tasks, you are essentially kidnapped and thrown into a cell. Once you escape the cell and the area itself, you get an update on your goal, and it is to follow blood trails to the exit? Since when was this a good idea? What makes you think that blood trails will lead to an exit? We don't know who wrote on the walls, and even if we knew it was Father Martin, he was the one who put us here in the first place. I think it makes more sense to pretty much depend solely on ourselves for this one. Have it be that we just, go wherever we can as opposed to follow blood trails, because the irony here is that there's only one way to go. It happens to be the blood trails. But hey, I must follow the whims of the objective. Upon following the blood trails, we end up seeing people jumping down a hole into the, we assume, sewers through the shower room. And so we're going to go down there? Okay, well, I don't know why that seems to be the best idea, but sure, let's go down there and try to find an exit. God damn it, you're the one who told me to go down here, objective screen. Why must you betray me? What? Why? What's in the male ward? Why? What do you know that I don't? Why isn't the objective escape? Once we get to the ground floor of the male ward, we are faced with this insanity.
I fear death.
Why? Why in the hell would we ever do that? He is the reason all of this went to hell for us. He ruined everything. Why are we trying to find him? Okay, but I still have no idea why the fuck we're doing this. For fuck's sake. Ugh. Okay, seriously, why in the fuck are we so obsessed with Father fucking Martin? The only reason I could conceivably pull off for this is that he says...
But you can't leave. Not yet. There is so much yet for you to witness. Will you see it? Can you? Our Lord, the Wall Rider, tearing his truth into the unbelievers. The only way out of this place is the truth. Accept the gospel, and all doors will open before you.
Like, are you for real? You went off this for the whole game, you retarded objective marker? If I didn't know any better, I still wouldn't take his crazy lead. But this guy is not to be trusted. If we take his advice and do everything he says, what makes you think you won't end up in some worse part of this whole place? God fucking damn it. So in terms of how the events unfold, our player needs to be in certain places at certain times to make certain characters and environments change or progress. I mean, that's storytelling 101, but more to the point, making it hard to see the strings is what's important. Don't make players question shit. Now, once you enter the asylum for the express purpose of recording some shady shit and collecting some documents detailing it, once you see enough blood, you will want to hightail it out of there. The cool thing is you can move all the way back out of the asylum from the point of entering the vent, but as soon as you leave the vent, you are trapped. Of course, the gates are closed and there's nothing you can do, and all the ways they block you off in this game are with stacking some tables and chairs that you couldn't possibly climb over, but we will forgive them for that. Point is that everything is making sense, and they manage this all the way up till Miles decides he wants to follow the priest and his blood trails. I honestly had no idea why the fuck he wanted to do this so badly. Even Miles questions it at one point, but it amounts to nothing. It had a profound effect on my immersion because if I were in this situation I wouldn't be making these decisions, and isn't that the point of the game? The story is more about what happens in these areas and after them, not why or how we got to them. That is left in the dirt, since I believe this game was constructed with set pieces first, and traveling between them is simply what the objectives function as. They have no bearing on escaping in reality. Look at how they worded the last objective before you enter the facility. The elevator will take you to the main exit. This is the only objective written this way, and I believe it is because they needed to remind you of just why the hell you've done all of the things you've done in the game so far. Why you chased Blood, why you chased Father Martin for so long, to let you know that you still are actually interested in leaving this asylum instead of being a part of the wild goose chase. To give you that feeling of hope while also trying to quell any sense of confusion. Also, why can't the elevator just go back up? Did Father Martin edit the mechanics to lock once it goes to the bottom or some shit? Is there no option for a staircase to this facility that we could get out with? Talk about safety violations. Anyway, to refocus, motivation for travel is weak in Outlast. We are given very little reason for our character to move from A to B, and it operates far more like an on-rails experience. Since if you were to remove these objectives from the game entirely, I actually believe the game would have been better off. Traveling from each location would more than likely have felt far less linear. For instance, when playing something like Amnesia, everyone has a different scenario for their biggest scares, enemies in different positions, the player in different parts of the world itself, different pieces of music and/or monsters really hitting them hard. Granted, there are common sequences like the water monster, however people will still play these scenarios differently, learn differently, and succeed differently, creating compilations that are completely different. Contrast with a horror game where there is intense scripting and the story is as linear as Call of Duty, what do we end up with? Well, let's go as far as ignoring the compilations of scares for now. How about the reviewers of this game? Or the reviews themselves? How many of them use the exact same scares for each of their videos?
Really disturbed tormentors.
Little pig.
Anyway, peace out. Nice one.
Little pig.
Around for a little bit until being met by Chris.
Some less than pleasant patients. They will chase you through the halls, stifling your
Little fecal bits.
Little pig.
Everybody who hasn't played this to play this is not really my type of game.
They almost always follow an appropriate level of build-up and tension.
Little pig.
Oh my god. Also throughout the game,
Little pig.
Notice how many of the videos use it for effect, as if anyone hasn't seen this bloody scene a million times over. This is something I'm going to dig into far more in another section, but for now, there are some more story-related things to cover. I like a lot of what Outlast does to tell you shit without it being completely obvious. Examples of this are littered well in the beginning, the car headlights flashing past the Mount Massive Asylum signpost, the radio suddenly cutting out after you get close to the asylum to let us know there won't be any calling the police in this game. Also that they didn't default to this being a horrible set of Nazi-conducted inhumane experiments. This was something that a greedy American company wanted to use for making profits, which is refreshing, but some people really didn't get the message on that.
Nazi-conducted dream experiments.
Nazi doctors.
No, it was one German man who had these ideas and decided to run with them underneath the commands of the Nazis, who really didn't have much influence in the creation of it at all. And besides, the main game is run by some greedy Americans, so it's really... You know, that this is a time when we need to say hashtag not all Nazis. Now let's get negative again. The priest is heavily obsessed, it seems, with you getting everything including his own death and the Walrider on your camera before you are free to let the world see it. Apparently this is helpful to whatever he wants, spreading the truth with lies or something. Now the point that I think is relevant here is, what in the world did the priest want you to do down in the research center? We already had confirmation from him that we recorded the Walrider and he knows that we've seen it. Hell, we watched it with him. Why did he send you down there since he worships the Walrider, so killing it certainly wasn't what he wanted you to do, but he never makes that clear, it's just nonsense. Why doesn't the priest care if you choose not to record his death? You can literally keep the camera down and not witness the penultimate act, but he doesn't react whatsoever, nor do his minions. It would have been a nice opportunity for some kind of alternate route since witnessing has motivated the priest throughout the game. Why in the hell did we follow the priest so goddamn far? Okay, we have been over that, but still, this whole thing makes no sense whatsoever. They have their characters talk in riddles regularly to make you think there is something to it. Though I imagine that isn't as retarded as finding the key to the morphogenic engine just casually written on some whiteboard in a random research room. Honestly, when I first saw this I just laughed, because obviously we have no idea what it means, and the idea that this could even remotely explain how the fuck all the convoluted nonsense with the engine and the nanomachines and the Walrider is... fucking... That's audacious of them to place it there. I would have preferred they just leave it to some sense of magic that is science fiction, but no, look guys, there's a reason it works right there. Science. How about the idea that there are no security clears for shutting down Billy, or that everything is as simple as Lego to pull off in terms of destroying his life support? There's a theory floating around that Miles was possessed by the Walrider in the end of the game because Miles had experienced the required proximity to death that is needed for the subject to be able to open the gate, as it were. My issue with this is that I wonder if the developers would honestly try and convince me that a few hours being chased by weirdos, getting 2 fingers chopped off and seeing flesh and blood is enough. When we have people who have had everything chopped off and everything scarred while being trapped and submitted to mental torture for potentially years, how could they possibly equate? Whether or not that theory is actually valid considering all those things, I think it's dumb. Now there's something else to address.
The end of Outlast is simply disappointing.
The ending is also a bit of a pain for me.
The ending is absolutely ass.
Now I don't know if you guys were expecting me to agree the ending was terrible or that I was going to defend the ending was good, but I don't see why the ending would annoy anyone considering it's about as coherent and satisfying as the rest of the story in the game. We as the player are being taken for a ride, we have no effect on the story at all, and ultimately the fact that Miles doesn't really make it out alive isn't a shock since this is supposed to be a good old horror experience, right? Rarely do they have happy endings. I think what I'm getting at is I didn't think the ending to the story was bad. I thought the whole story was bad. We have many moments throughout the game implying there is some big twisting story that'll explain everything, but in reality, we simply have another Five Nights at Freddy's level of misdirection and conflicting ideas squashed into a big mess of flesh and blood to try and have people come up with their own stories, which has value, I wouldn't disagree, but it doesn't take talent to have your audience tell the story for you. I mean, fuck, they left it so far open that people thought demons were invading the world. That's gotta be evidence of a well-told story, right? So there's still a burning mechanic to talk about, and that is the notes. Notes are almost entirely a staple of this genre, since they provide a non-intrusive method of drip-feeding backstory and lore to the player without being ham-fisted. However, there is a balance to strike. Nobody wants to have to deal with large amounts of words to read, nor do they want a single sentence after finding what appears to be a secret note. So how does Outlast do? Well, we have a whole bunch of notes ranging from genuine information about the character we are, his feelings and motivations, all the way to character profiles and descriptions of operations in the facility itself. Now, when you have to look through documents and read words such as plateaued, 2000 ppm, spirometry, bronchial accumulation, dermal eruptions, this starts to get a little bit retarded. Not many normies in the world will have any idea what the hell these words pertain to, nor will they find much solace in that you skip a very large portion of the document's opening piece that basically runs down the more official information. I believe this was done for the sake of realism, but it has a profound effect of boredom upon reading it. The decision of whether or not there are too many notes or they are too boring to read is obviously subjective, but when you find that there are notes that are completely unimportant or that simply add a level of flavor to the environment, you may find yourself being completely put off from putting in the effort. The other source of note reading comes entirely from notes that are either written by you on the go or found. These notes will give you insight into Miles Upshur as well as explain some things that you may not have put together. However, you will need to have the camera up in order to activate these kinds of notes. Most of the time it'll be Miles writing about how the horrible thing you just saw was really, really horrible and how he's slowly losing his mind. Not to mention the more crude side of Miles that I'm glad was not voice acted. Some of this is just a little bit weird. Many people have praised the system of requiring you to keep the camera up to receive notes and that the notes are quite interesting to read. I beg to differ. Number 1. The notes themselves should be a resource that you are rewarded for by finding them, rather than arbitrarily forcing the player to look through the grain and faint green filter while searching in order to receive them, not to mention the HUD that comes with that. This resource would have been supplied to the character throughout the game to not only provide a level of understanding to the environment and events when significant, but it would have allowed the developers to speak to the player in a non-direct way, talking about things that may have been missed or adding history from Miles we couldn't have known. Not only have they made it arguably a secret to find, but they have also used the opportunity to simply have Miles complain and re-report everything we've already seen. Finally, if we are to take this realistically, how the fuck is Miles writing on a piece of paper and then telling us to read it? As far as I can tell, I'm supposed to take it very metaphorically, as though it is a thought rather than a note, and that Miles is simply thinking about things, which would be a tad more believable if it weren't called notes and weren't written on a notepad, but hey, what are you gonna do? Directly compare this to the notes in Amnesia, where we're being told the story of where Daniel started and how he got to the beginning of the game, complete with very realistic voice acting and sound effects of the environment the events took place. Outlast felt like a big missed opportunity when it came to notes, copying its spiritual predecessor but missing what made the notes meaningful in the first place. That's not to say they're worthless, just a missed opportunity in my experience with the game, and they certainly didn't help me understand the story by any stretch of the imagination. Not to mention that there are certain events that you would expect Miles to comment on, but doesn't. But I guess that's more to do with Miles' character. I guess we would need a whole section for something like that. So to frame this in a way that makes sense, I want to go over the information we get about these characters and how much impact they have on the experience in the game, as well as a few criticisms here and there. I mean, it is me after all. So let's first look at Miles Upshaw. Miles is an outspoken journalist who's lost his last position because of his controversial views on the Afghanistan war and now works freelance. This very well explains why the whistleblower chose him for this job, being that it would require a headstrong, story-chasing journalist to find and record the truth. Aside from that, we get a little bit of insight about his character from his notes, and because of the way he words a lot of it, you could potentially see why he was fired. Miles is an aggressive man with no filters, who employs dark humor in the most inappropriate of situations, but it is what makes him stable throughout the game. His motivation is fueled by his hatred for the Murkoff Corporation, made clear in the opening of the game, and as I said, it's commendable that his thoughts and feelings were sequestered to these little notes, as him saying all of this out loud would have been bloody distracting. Another connection would be that I think his sympathy for the death of Chris Walker originates with his work in Afghanistan. He is probably well aware of the suffering that soldiers go through and that Chris's life is a tragic one. But now he can find peace. It is still disappointing that the notes don't serve much of a purpose outside of that. Outside of his small commentary pieces, since we only needed one note to establish his character, the notes could have been used to have references to his history, of the experiences that made him who he was, of what he knows about Murkoff, but never mind. Miles, as I said before, makes decisions that don't seem to originate from reality. He'll decide to take directions based on things that real people simply wouldn't put much stock in. However, he is established relatively well, and I think he was more than serviceable for the game itself. So who's next? Chris Walker. Originally serving in Afghanistan, Walker was hired as security for the Murkoff Corporation, and at some point his psyche broke. As he began trying to murder both patient and colleague alike, upon being subdued and captured, he was horribly injured. Once Murkoff caught wind of this, his crimes were framed upon another inmate, and he was moved to Mount Massive Asylum to be the victim of the Walrider Project. These experiences have driven him to become the monster we see in Outlast. He has an undying thirst to search for the person who may or may not be harboring the Walrider. This obsession likely is the result of his time as an officer in the military and how protocol had to be followed. Aside from that, Chris has a few quirks in that he'll murmur as he walks around, implying that he has a semblance of thought, and the whole containment thing implies that he has a strong purpose, as opposed to the idea that he just wants to kill everyone. Let's not forget that when you escape him, you can catch him saying "God damn it" in a most pissed off way. Other than that, he's relatively simple. He wants you dead, you want to live, let's move on. The twins. These are two guys who are in the asylum and they want to kill you. They want to kill you so they can eat you. They follow the priest's orders, they will approach you extremely slowly whenever they see you. There aren't any reasons for any of these things. All of it's kind of just how it works and we don't get any other information. The twins feel very forced in that they feel like a horror-made set of characters. They talk calmly and in turn with accents that aren't any like the standard inmates, making reference to the horrible things they're going to do to Miles, but in a calm manner.
I would like to kill him. As would I. The preacher asked us not to. It would be impolite. Not here. We give him a running start. There's an idea. And when we kill him, we kill him slow. Such patience. I want his tongue and liver. They are yours.
Why are these guys here? Why do they want me so much? Why do they do such a horrendously bad job at trying to kill me? Is it simply because the priest told them to? Why aren't they trying to escape right now? What made them stop trying to kill me? Why do they listen to the priest? Oh, I know why. Because mystery is great, and we all need more of that in our lives, right? It's so much better when a story doesn't tell you what the fuck is going on or why characters do anything, because it lets you imagine why, to the point where you write the story yourself and tell people online to the means that satisfy you and others, and then the writers get the credit for the story that you and others crafted. Point is that the twins feel extremely shoehorned. The lack of explanation for any of their characteristics is an attempt to come off as eerie, but to me, it is just a blatant lack of effort to make an established antagonist. They don't have any history or respective effect on the asylum themselves, they just appear and disappear, and they will be hostile and non-hostile. They get plonked into random parts of the game when they needed to break the monotony of other enemies being too repetitive. The irony being that they showed just how lacking in any difference the twins were, but we shall return to them. Also, their lip sync is bloody awful.
His tongue and his liver. Yours. Mine.
However, it's not like Red Barrels are incapable of actual effort when it comes to character execution. Let's talk about Richard Traeger. Traeger was the head of research and development at Mount Massive Asylum for the Murkoff Corporation, though along the way he began to lose his mind and become obsessed with unnecessary surgery since he is fascinated by biology. Traeger captured and tortured many during his time as the presumptive surgeon despite not having the training, and when we meet him, he is calm, cool, and upbeat.
Oh, movies. And it'll give us a chance to talk.
There isn't really any way to describe Traeger in Outlast without mentioning how great his sequence is. His speech is filled with little intonations that lend assumptions about his character. He laughs, he jokes, and laments about the state of Miles and humanity itself. Honestly, listening to him is very refreshing and interesting since it lends so much curiosity to the player. You want to figure this guy out, and there is enough background to imply that a man like this could exist in a scenario like this one. You are rolled past Traeger's current victims and shown his reaction to them. He really doesn't care. And he certainly didn't register them as human any longer, nor does he show any appreciation for the state of that being regardless. You know what is in store for you if you remain his prisoner, and that is terrifying. Combine all of this with the fact that he baits your own escape, knowing you cannot reach it, and if you paid special attention to the surrounding area, you would notice there's a message scrawled in blood on one of the walls. Considering what Traeger cuts off first, you can imagine what's coming next. Traeger beats out every other character including Miles by a country mile. He creates a very memorable experience in Outlast and represents what I would fully argue is the highlight of the entire game, but for more reasons than just Traeger's character. So next up is Father Martin Archambaud, who is pretty damn elusive in the actual game and for the most part, just insane. From my own recollection, he is a devout follower of the religion of the Walrider, which is likely a result of Wernicke's German folklore stories making its way around the asylum. Archambaud was apparently rather sane by comparison before the higher-ups took away his finger painting, and now he fancies himself as sort of prophet for the Walrider. He is calm and collected, and has what seems to be a very solid purpose and perspective. He will move through the game, somehow convincing the protagonist that he will set him free right up until he has his followers set fire to him. On a, well, I don't know what you call this thing. What do you guys call this thing? I'm not sure. Let's ask one of the reviewers.
And he burns himself on a Jesus stick.
Yes, a Jesus stick. Anyway, that is about the maximum amount of time I can afford to you wonderful folks today. Next time, we'll finish up talking about the characters and move on to things that are a little bit more substantial, let's say. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in 2 days.